Good morning, and can I invite you to take your seats, please, and welcome you to this session this morning on communication and reassurance in both conservative and surgical healthcare consultations. And it's my huge privilege this morning to introduce you to Professor Tamar Pincus, who I'm sure many of you will be familiar with. Professor Pincus's work spans 30 years and has been hugely impactful in clinical practice and national guidelines. And Tamar has also undertaken a large body of work training physiotherapists and practitioners in implementing this work and using that to feed forwards into her future work and practice. So without further ado, I'll leave you to Tamar. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Just to say, I'm Tamar, not Tamar, despite the river and the Auditorium. Thank you very much for staying for this, and I'm told that I absolutely have to finish on time, so I'm going to speak really quickly, and the faster I speak, the more South African I'm going to sound, just so you know. So with pretty much all conference, we've talked or dipped into discussions about communication and reassurance, and how important they are. And what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and put a little bit of evidence around that, maybe a little bit of models around that, but I'm also going to try and take it to primary care, physiotherapy, a little bit, and really importantly, surgeons. Because until now, the message that we had was something like, everybody else does it, but surgeons don't. And the answer is some of them do, and quite well, actually. So where do we start from? Patient-centered care has been with us forever, and we all, to a certain extent, buy into it. Joint decision-making, reflective empathy, listening, but we don't actually do it because the system is against us in terms of time, in terms of education, and also we have, as human beings, an innate need to control, especially on our own territory. So we don't give away the power, and we don't share it easily. And our aim of consultations are always to find out what's wrong, and then find a way of fixing it. And all of that stands in the way of listening to stories. We don't listen to stories. And in a way, this follows on from Peter's talk, just checking it's working, from Peter's talk, but also from Martin's talk about the NICE guidelines back in 1994, where we were all told to reassure, not how, just reassure. And then Peter told us that it really matters, and some ideas about what not to do. So way back in 2008, Stephen Linton and team helped us a little bit by defining what reassurance actually means. You don't need to read the whole thing. What matters is to know that it's something you do. Something that you do in what you say, how you say it, very much how you say it, when you say it, and the result of it is that your patient's anxiety and concerns are reduced. When I read that all that time ago, I was thinking, this is really good, because now I see that reassurance is a behavior, and that means I can observe it, and even more important, I can measure it. So I thought, that's great. Let's go and measure reassurance in consultation. And I did what everybody does, which is I aimed for a systematic review, and our first systematic review all that time back try to find out what are the components that make up reassurance. And we were working from the only model at the time which said there's two. One of them is affective reassurance, and one of them is cognitive reassurance. I'll break that down for you in a minute. So we set out to do this systematic review, a rather large one. We thought it's really important to have a timeline to see from what clinicians do, what happens to patients later. We thought primary care was a really good place to start, especially in conditions where there was high uncertainty of what was really going on and prognostic uncertainty, what was going to happen later. Back pain falls into that. In fact, the vast majority of the studies we looked at were from back pain, but we had some others as well. And reassurance was measured in these studies through videos, through questionnaires to patients, questionnaires to clinicians sometimes, and then you got a follow-up, and you could have anything that we could code as a good outcome: disability, healthcare utilization, pain, depression, and so on. So we had to code those behaviors in two ways: affective reassurance and cognitive reassurance. Now, the original model maintained that affective reassurance was bad for patients. Steve Vogel and I were working together at the time, and we kept looking at each other and going, yeah, how? Empathy's bad? No. And the reason that they thought that affective reassurance was bad for patients is because it's very fast. If I say to a patient, it's going to be okay, trust me, your back is strong, everything's going to pass, the patient's concerns are immediately reduced. They have minimum processing that they need to do. I've done it. They've gone, yes, it's okay. She'll take care of me. It's on her. Really fast. They don't need to do anything else. They don't need to even listen to me, really. I've done it. 3 weeks later, 3 months later, pain hits them again. I'm not there. They've got nothing. In fact, I've broken the trust with them, and therefore they feel betrayed and more scared. Catastrophizing is even higher. So maybe affective reassurance is not great. And on the other hand, you can see the turtle there, that cognitive reassurance is slow. If you want to educate patients, if you want to educate anybody, you have to do it iteratively. You have to check that they understood. You have to use a language that they understand. And you'd go through it slowly until they go, I get that, and I agree with it. Two things we don't do very well. So we've got cognitive reassurance, we've got affective reassurance, and we've got results from the systematic review, which basically tell us that cognitive reassurance is really, really important. You knew this already. I don't need to tell you this. But really surprisingly, we also have results showing that affective reassurance is a little bit maybe. In other words, sometimes when you say, trust me, it's okay, it's going to be fine, people feel patronized. And maybe later on, when you're not there and it hits them again, it means they have to run and seek further care from somebody else. So, some of the most common statements that even Peter told us about might not work here. The back is strong, it's going to be okay, lots of people get it. To at least some of our patients, this is a recipe for bad outcomes. And I'll try and show you that in some of the stuff we've got. This slide is just to show you that these days we're kind of splitting affective reassurance into two components. The green components are items that our research has shown are really important to do, and in fact, I will argue that it's really hard to do cognitive reassurance unless you've done affective reassurance effectively. But the red ones are the ones which appear to be the danger signs, at least to people with a big burden of psychological issues. So we're not the only ones who are researching this, and just to show you that there's plenty of other people who are getting on this, and you've got a clinical review here which really emphasizes some of the points about reassurance that we've already made, but the second point has already been emphasized by Peter. And I'm going to run on because I need to get to the evidence. So, in summary, cognitive reassurance is really important. Do a lot of it, but when it comes to affective reassurance, think carefully who you're telling that everything's going to be okay. Most of the time, for some people, it's really not. We developed a measure, because that's what we do as psychologists. We're very good at doing questionnaires. So we developed a measure to measure consultation-based reassurance, and we had 4 components in it. These components are actually really important, and I'm just going to stop on them for a second. One of them is really getting the story, maybe reading the case notes. We've had a lot of evidence, especially from extensive long-term back pain. By the time it gets to the surgeons and the file is this big, it's very, very rare that they have read it by the time they see the patient. So the question is, how do we get the story from the patient? And just anecdotally, one of a clinician who I really, really admire, who's very short on time and running late, said to one of the patients, okay, we're running late, we're very short on time, and I need to know the whole story. Tell me what I need to know. So the triage is done by the patient, but the story is still delivered. Second component there is about building relationships. Nowadays, we've added stuff to it about validation. Really happy to answer questions about validation if we have time. In the end, our team is working very hard to understand what validation means and what it does. Then you've got the generic reassurance, which I've mentioned already, and cognitive reassurance, which you know about. And that's kind of a summary of the build-up of what we now think reassurance is. After this, we did a whole load of studies, mixed methodology. So we've got qualitative, we've got longitudinal studies. We have no RCT on this. You're very welcome to put one together. I doubt it will get funded. So we worked in primary care and we worked in surgical settings, and I'm just going to show you a little bit of our body of work, and then I'm going to settle on a surgical one because I really like it. So this is our body of work. That one on the top, I'm very proud of that one. That is a qualitative study interviewing surgeons about how they feel about patients who come to them with an awful lot of distress and disability but are not suitable for surgery. How do they feel telling patients in a reassuring manner that they're not going to get surgery? And the lovely quote there is from a surgeon. It's like taking them to the ice cream shop and telling them they can't have ice cream. Which is, yeah. Then we've got a bunch of others. We've got some, sorry, I can't really read my own writing here. Or there.
Would you like me to read it out?
We've got qualitative work with patients, how they felt when they were told they're not going to get surgery. And then we've got a bunch of longitudinal studies. There's a really lovely new study which isn't ours, so I thought I'd push it in here, which is a qualitative study with physios. And here are some of the quotes from it, which I don't have time to read to you, but talk about how physios perceive reassurance and the importance of reassurance, and how they talk about, and validation, and how they talk about the fact that if you don't get that right, you're lost already. So it seems to me, and also, of course, I work with physios really closely, it seems to me like physios are getting the story of reassurance and validation, but there might be other disciplines that get it an awful lot less. So what have patients told us about reassurance? The first thing that they've told us is that empathy and caring is really, really important to them, but if you don't give them cognitive reassurance, education, information, ideas about what the prognosis might be, ideas about what might not go right, and talk to them about it, they do not feel reassured. So it's not just about the touchy-feely side, it has to be about education as well. Yeah, and the rest is in there. So does reassurance actually have an impact on outcomes? This is the meat of it, isn't it? So it's really nice to say that it makes people happy, but does it actually make a difference long-term to outcomes that we usually measure in randomized controlled trials? So, in general, yes, reassurance is associated with positive outcomes, and here's a lovely study from Scandinavia. Quite a big sample, more than 2,000 people. They took our questionnaire, they took the total of the questionnaire, not the breakdown of the components, and they looked at 2 weeks later and 3 months later. And although the effect is small, you need to translate this into cost effectiveness, because really it saves an awful lot of money as well as impacting well on patients. And I'll show you that from the UK more specifically. Okay, so before we look at what we do right, let's look a little bit at what can go wrong. And this is a longitudinal study looking at reassurance in primary care. So this is with GPs. Whoops. This is with GPs. It's a prospective cohort study, and it's a nightmare doing stuff like this in primary care because you never get a real baseline. What I mean by this is that you're not allowed to ask patients for research purposes why they're coming in to see the GP, so you have to catch them after they've seen the GP, and that's not a true baseline. But you can still ask them to tell you how the consultation went, how they feel about it, what the GP did, most importantly, in terms of our questionnaire of reassurance, and you can follow them up. And these are the things that we measured. So you've got our fake baseline, which has got pain and function and age and gender, practitioner gender, everything we thought could influence outcomes. And then you add reassurance on top of it, which is what did they actually do? Did you feel enabled? And you follow them up for 3 months, and you look at pain and function and further healthcare, and very importantly, mood. And the first thing to say is that reassurance really predicts reassurance very, very strongly. I mean, we're talking here about a correlation of about 0.7. It's really, it is the thing that makes people happy or not. And from the earlier on, the plenary earlier on, by the way, I really wonder how reassurance reduces litigation. It would be very good to look at that, wouldn't it? So, yes, reassurance is important. It makes people satisfied, happy, and enabled. But what about the generic reassurance? I showed you early on that I'm worried about that one, that it's going to be okay, trust me. So here's a pretty little graph, which I'm going to try and interpret for you because it's not obvious. This is at 3 months, and these are measures of depression. And you've got two groups here. The group in blue are people who came in with very, very low scores on the psychosocial aspect of the start back. So remember, that's the bit that asks about depression, anxiety, catastrophizing. They don't have a psychological burden. And you can see that when they got generic reassurance, that one is a lot of it, okay? That's the highest generic reassurance. Their mood improves. They do really well. I might argue that they would do very well anyway on anything because they have very little risk factors. But look what happens to the other guys. The other guys are walking in with catastrophizing, with depression, with anxiety. Those that got a lot of generic reassurance, 3 months later, it goes up. This is adjusted for everything else. So we are adjusting for disability, for pain, age, etc. Seems like generic reassurance can make people depressed if they've walked in with depression already. Telling them it's okay might make them feel very lost 3 months later when it's not okay. Moving on swiftly to surgical settings. This is a prospective, well, we did the qualitative one first. This is just asking patients how they feel when they go all the way to surgery with low back pain, and then they're told that they're not going to get surgery. And when we look at what they think good reassurance is, it's really bigger than the ones in primary care. This is starting to be so much, it's hard for anyone to achieve all of it. And this is the study. I'm actually really proud of this study. First of all, because there's hardly any longitudinal studies in surgical settings that look at psychological factors. But also, we got a real baseline. So we were able to catch these patients before they ever got into the surgeons. The second thing I'm really proud of is that this is a pretty clean group of patients. Or is it? These are people who were referred for musculoskeletal low back pain with no red flags and maybe no sciatica. We tried to find out, we screened them, we said, do you have any pain traveling down your leg? No, they said. So we thought, oh, this is really interesting. These guys basically shouldn't be getting surgery, kind of, maybe. This study was done with Nafis, for those of you who know him here. And he doesn't think that the patients gave us a really reliable answer there. He thinks that if you prod, you might find out that some of them did have surgery, and that's why they ended up there. But for us, it was a clean group of people. And these are the things that we measured. And you can see that we've got a nice 3-point there. We've got the before, we've got the after, we've got the follow-up. They're all pretty logical things to measure. And these are how the people were. This is also really interesting. So if you look at pain and disability and depression, these guys are not really high. These are pretty much the same as what you'd find in primary care trials, such as the Start Back trial and so on. So these guys, from our measures, they are not suffering sufficiently for you to say, you don't have any red flags, you don't have any sciatica, but hey, I'm going to refer you to a surgeon. And there's hundreds and hundreds of them. So this is what happened when they appeared this is 5 different hospitals and about 15 different surgeons. This is what happened. About 123 of them were discharged with nothing, literally through the revolving door. You're not getting surgery, go away. Another group were referred to other things, usually physio, sometimes aqua, and some injections, and a whole load of other stuff. And look what happened to them 3 months later. These are big numbers. 30% of them were told, you're not suitable for surgery, there's nothing we can do for you, no red flags. Straight through the revolving door to the GP, but not just the GP. Chiros, physios, we had faith healers. Anything and everything. And actually, even if they were referred to something else, they're doing that revolving door anyway. These are really, really high consulting people. So how did reassurance impact on this? I think this is a particularly problematic group of people. So, in the short term, reassurance is incredibly important for satisfaction. It's important to enablement. The full model accounts for 40%. This is good stuff. You need to reassure, guys, surgeons. There was a great variability on reassurance as well. One of the things that was really interesting on this is that the variability in surgeons is much higher than the variability in physios. So remember, we've run this with GPs, physios, and surgeons using the same questionnaire. One of the things we get with physios, now all the physios are going to grin, is a ceiling effect. In other words, they reassure so well that we can hardly get enough variability to use it. We get more with GPs, but with surgeons, we get this huge variability. Some don't give any reassurance at all, and indeed we have quotes from our qualitative studies such as, I do backs, can you please take the head and the mind, and you can do your psychological stuff on it, and I'll do the spine. Of course, if we did that, the patient would be dead. So we've got sufficient variability, and in the short term, we know that we make patients much more satisfied. But here's some of the stuff that's even more interesting, which is reassurance impacts on the burden of care later on. It's small, but it's significant. And I just want to highlight the last one there, which is to do with mood, which is if you take reassurance and everything else you do as surgeons, you can predict a whole load of what's going to happen to distress in your patients. And I think that in itself is incredibly important to think about. How am I going to reassure better? And again, we've got a body of work on this, and as Peter said, the vast majority of surgeons have told us that they like working with physiotherapists because the physiotherapists can offer the reassurance and they don't have to. And maybe that's the right way of going about it, but it makes me worry. So, people with low back pain without red flags who might or might not have sciatica are a group of people, and who end up with surgeons, are a group of people with huge high care utilization. And just saying you don't need surgery doesn't seem to reassure them at all. We need to do something else, which I will argue includes validation. Do ask me about it. And even though the variance is small, if you translate it into pounds, you are getting a very, very significant piece of work on this. You can change things simply by changing how you do things rather than what you do. The real question is how we train people, who we train, and how fast we can deliver change. This was funded. I'm really grateful. Thank you very much.
Very well delivered talk. Really appreciate that. Any questions we have before I start asking some questions? Anybody? Go, Steve.
Is that the point where it says, is that the alarm for she needs to stop now?
No.
No. You've got time. We've got time.
The restraint teams are still outside. So one of the things thinking about this work is the kind of overlap between patient-centered care, building therapeutic alliance, and the components of reassurance. What do you think the real distinctive things are around clinical behaviors that promote reassurance?
Okay, so we as psychologists, we specialize in using jargon, and we do that in order to confuse you into thinking that we know something that you don't.
I think that goes for the surgeons as well.
So So patient-centered care is such a muddy term, it means almost nothing to me in reality. As a scientist, I find it very hard to measure, and when I do measure it, it's got about 54 different components in it, which is really hard to regress onto anything. Then you've got therapeutic alliance, which is even muddier because it's come from a whole load of different theories, including some very dodgy psychodynamic ones. See, I threw in a jargon there, psychodynamic. What I like about this is that it's very simple. It tells you you've got these building blocks which are to do with understanding the story, with building the rapport, and with giving good education afterwards. The most important thing to me right now is within the building rapport, we have an element which we are now calling validation. It is really specific. Validation is made out of 3 components, and we know this now, especially in pain. The first one is reflective listening around the impact of pain. I can hear what you've been through. This happened to you, and this is how it's impacting to you. Component 2, I believe you. You're not exaggerating. I absolutely understand and accept your suffering, if you want to use that term. And the third one, which we hardly ever do, is, and this is normal. Anybody would respond the same. You are not exaggerating. Now, this concept of validation is measurable, and the question is, when we do it, what do we do? Have I got 2 minutes?
Yes, you have.
Okay. So here's what my team are working on right now, and I think that this is absolutely fundamental. If you think about Neanderthal woman, when she had pain, she had to convey that she had pain to the rest of the species, because if she didn't, nobody would take care of her. Nobody would feed her, nobody would protect her. Basically, a mammoth would come and drag her away. I know they did not coexist. So Neanderthal woman is going, I'm in pain, and somebody needs to turn around and say, I hear you, I'm going to be here for you. Until that somebody says that, she has to keep saying it. She has to keep going, I'm in pain, I'm in pain, I'm in pain. You ask me why patients repeat and repeat and repeat their agony, and it starts going higher and higher and higher. They haven't been heard, or they don't know that they've been heard, because you hear them, but you don't realize that you need to tell them that you've heard them. So we have this need, and it occupies all the resources in our brain to communicate that we are suffering because of our pain. It is completely natural. It is completely normal. Validation answers this need. Now, note, I said all the resources in our brain. These are cognitive resources, our ability to process new information, make decisions about it, recall it, and act on it. We know that pain patients don't do that effectively. We have a plethora of experiments showing that they are unable to do problem solving to the same extent that you can. So validation comes in here and says, I hear you, I believe you, it's normal, you're not exaggerating, and I'm going to do my best to help you. And at that point, you have freed resources in their brain to also hear the messages that you then give, those healthcare messages about moving well, about walking, about strengthening, and so on. We can test this. We are testing this. We can look at executive function. We can look at recall. We can look at exactly what happens the moment that you offer that validation. And that is the difference, Steve, between breaking it down into measurable scientific components, which are also completely valid in the real world. Because if a patient remembers more health messages accurately, that's meaningful. That's incredibly meaningful. And I can tell you, because it's currently under review, that they do when they're validated, in opposed to when they are invalidated. Did that answer?
Yes. I think you're absolutely right. I think most of the patients, especially with low back pain, and I'm sure everybody here would agree, that the patient many times thinks, oh, it's not in my head. They actually start off, it's not in my head, I am in pain, and nobody listens to me. And if you are trying to validate, if you have been able to, they do come back and say, thank you for listening. You're the first one who believes me that I'm in pain and I'm not mad. So, absolutely agreed.
Can I make one other point? Please? I'm so scared of Steve now. I'm like, Okay, so the other point is that when we reassure, I think that at least my research and training suggests that we need to understand that truth is very local. And what I mean by that is that the truth to the patient might not be your truth, but it is just as valid. Example, I was working with a physiotherapist to deliver effective reassurance, and we did a simulation, and they had a patient who was saying, I can't stand up, I can't walk. And the physio said to the patient, stand up now. And the patient kind of stood up, and the physio gave a little Cheshire Cat smile of, I caught you out, you can stand. Now, for me, at that moment in time, reassurance and rapport and therapeutic align were all broken. There was no utility to proving that it was not true. It's still true. It's still true if it's true in the patient's head. So we need to find a way of understanding how to convince people and reassure them, even when we disagree with their beliefs. You cannot push them up the hill to change their beliefs. You need to stand by their side, look up the hill and go, which of these several paths do you want to take? Because we need to get there. I'll walk by your side. That's the only way.
Really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Very well talked.
So look, it's confession time. I'm in the embarrassing position of having scared our keynote speaker into finishing ahead of time. Because I'm aware some aspects of the conference we haven't run on time, and when we run in parallel sessions, it's upsetting for lots of people. And why I was so keen to run on time is the next two sessions, we've got 3 speakers in this next session for half an hour, and then in the session afterwards, we've got 9 or 8, we're not sure if one person is here, but we've got 9 or 8 sessions in an hour. And yeah, Pal and I are due to the task of getting some research leaders, especially in the subsequent session, to run on time with 5 minutes only each. And so that's why I was keen for this last session to finish on time. And weirdly enough, it's finished ahead of time. So I'm now in the awkward position of us being ahead of the schedule.
I mean, we could catch up on the research. It usually takes time. The last time you want to cut it short, so it's fine.
It's true, it's true. I'm just aware that some people might be coming, particularly at the time it's announced in the catalogue. But this session is about some of the society fellowships that the societies award, the travel fellowships and the Future Leaders Programme. So it's a really good opportunity normally for people earlier in their career to develop and have some sponsorship from the societies, and it's a really important function of the societies as part of their charitable aims to promote development from colleagues at the start of their career. So the first group up are from the BAS team, or the BAS Society, British Association of Spinal Surgeons, and it's the Travelling Fellowships. Now I understand we have some of these presentations are en masse in groups.
This is both BAS and BSS Travelling Fellowship.
And
so
BSS, yeah, I'm sorry.
British Scoliosis Society as well. So can we have them up at stage to talk?
And so what we'll do is there's a presentation time slot allotted is 10 minutes for each group. And if you use all your 10 minutes, we won't have any questions. If you don't, we will have some questions.
Yeah.
Right, good morning everybody. My name is Jack Penn, and we also have Joe Marola here, and Ashraf Adul, and Adam Lloyd, and we are the BAS BSS Travelling Fellows, and we've been visiting some different units for the last couple of weeks. So just to start with a huge thank you to both BAS and BSS, especially Mr. Golash and Mr. Oxborough, for organising this and hosting us so well at their respective units. It was a really, really helpful 2 weeks for all of us. So thank you so much for this. So there's a bit of symmetry. We decided we probably came into the shortlisting process and alliteration with Jack and Joe, the neurosurgeons, and Adam and Ashraf, the orthopaedic surgeons. And It's often sort of got abbreviated Jack and Jill and Adam and Eve. And these are actually a couple of pictures from our time on the travelling fellowship. You can see there, this is when Mr. Golash told myself and Joe to go and fetch a pail of water when we were in Preston. And then this is when Adam and Ashraf were told by the ward matron that they weren't bare below the elbows, and they got a bit carried away with their infection precautions. And were told to take some time out in the garden to calm down. So the art of travel and why it's so important to learning. So the word peripatetic, which crops up every now and then, comes from the way Aristotle was supposed to have taught people by walking around and lecturing as you moved and showing things and giving it a more experiential flavour. And I think that's something that's really important and is often missed out, especially in our increasingly sort of internet-driven age. But actually physically going places and seeing new places, talking to people, finding out how things are done is a real experience. And again, that picture you can see up there, some of you may think this is Raphael's painting of Aristotle, but it's actually Mr. Golash and Mr. Oxborough ironing out the finer details of the fellowship the week before our arrival. So there were two cities really involved. We had Manchester, which is Salford, and the Children's Hospital, and then Preston, with the two respective presidents of BAS and BSS. So again, they were extremely good hosts, and I think that one of the reasons that we all took so much from this was because of their generosity. So I think Adam's going to say a few things about some of the digital things that we experienced, especially in Preston.
Thanks, Jack. Yes, everybody. So I think broadly, the two pairs of us had a very similar experience across both weeks. And again, reiterating our thanks to Mr. Golash and Mr. Oxborough for organising that. When we were preparing for today, we discussed some broad themes that we all found very interesting and some changes and variations in practice to what many of us had experienced previously. And I think one thing that stood out for both of us, well, for all four of us, I should say, when we were in Preston, was the use of digital technology and telemedicine, whether this be on the digital grand round with an iPad with various consultants and other members of the wider MDT logging in to be able to see their patients, whether this was telemonitoring in theatre, which Mr. Golash in particular was very enthusiastic about. And then a lot of use of digital consultation, and that was, I think, worked very nicely, and certainly a bit of a change from some of the practice that I have become accustomed to myself. So that was a really interesting aspect of the time in Preston.
Right, thank you. I actually came from Ireland, so this is a great honor, actually, an opportunity for me to be able to see how the NHS work and how the grass is not always green on the other side, I would say. Thank you both, Mr. Oxborough and Mr. Golash. It was actually nice to see that things aren't much different on both sides, the same struggles and the same probably care concerns. But more importantly that I've seen the idea of the two-surgeon operation more adopted here than in Ireland. I think you're probably more privileged to have more number of surgeons to be able to do that. But as we were discussing, this is probably going to be a growing concern for the trainees, and especially the fact that we probably are lucky to have lived through two generations that where all the surgeons where you're thrown into the water and taught how, and then learned how to swim, where you just go in and start operating by yourself. When you struggle, you call your boss, to a newer generation of surgeons where you'd have somebody standing above your shoulder always and do this and do that. But it's actually more interesting to see that two-surgeon operations are becoming more and more kind of reality now, and we don't know where will that leave us as trainees. I think in the future, probably the next generation of trainees, how is that going to affect them. But in any case, I think that's one thing I've seen more adopted here than in Ireland, and it was interesting to see, and to see the great achievement. I think when you do that, the fact that you have another mind thinking beside you is actually probably quite reassuring to be able to do more difficult and more complex cases than thinking you are alone in a dark room, I would say. And I think I could say the same for most of my colleagues.
So morning, everyone. So my name is Joe. I'd just like to reiterate my thanks to Mr. Golash and Mr. Oxborough. It was a fantastic learning opportunity. I think it's, we had some healthy debate about enabling technology during our time at Preston and Royal Salford, and I think it's fair to say that opinion still remains a little divided, but the more and more I have these conversations with colleagues, and even at this conference, the more I think I realize that the majority of us are perhaps more pro enabling technology. It's just that some are more pro than others. And as a consultant about to start his career, there are two key take-home messages with regards to enabling technology that I took from this fellowship. And one was to just to remember that enabling technology is an adjunct to my surgical capabilities, and that it's not something I should rely on solely. And I should realize that perhaps there are occasions when enabling technology can perhaps become disabling technology. But the other learning point was about the learning curve, and that we often talk about the learning curve from a surgeon's perspective, but this fellowship made me realize that there are wider implications for the team around us, and that, you know, from scrub staff to ODPs to radiographers, etc. They go through that learning journey with us, and it's only with the team that we can improve efficiencies in using or the use of enabling technology. So those are the key messages that I took from this fellowship.
Okay, so I think we've probably come to the end of our time slot. I know we want to keep on time here, but there are numerous other things that we learned that we don't have time to talk about, obviously, and lots of little things that I'm sure we probably didn't even realise at the time that we'll notice as we get back to our home units. Okay? All right, thank you very much.
Given we're ahead of schedule, we've got time for one question, if there is one.
So if nobody is coming forward, what is the one thing that you'll implement next year if you go back?
Sorry.
Here, what is the first thing or any one thing that you're going to implement that you saw in these two centers in your practice in the next 1 year?
For me, it would actually be the use of digital technologies to provide some telepresence and monitoring in theatre. So being able to, potentially as a consultant, keep an eye on what's going in theatre, even if you're not physically in the room. And there were, you know, I thought that was something that I found quite inspiring. It doesn't have to be done in a very expensive way, but having video links and even an earpiece in the primary operating surgeon's ear, so you can perhaps see what they're doing and steer them in the right direction, even if you're not physically in the room, I think was something that I'd always thought of as being something that required lots of infrastructure and sort of barriers before you could adopt it, but actually I don't think it does. So I think that's something that I found quite inspiring.
Judging by the nods of your colleagues, that seems like a consensus. Thanks very much, guys. The next speaker is David Herschel-Schmidt, who's the Society of Back Pain Research Travel Fellow.
Morning, thanks everyone. I'm really delighted to be here and talk about the SBPR Travel Fellowship that enabled me to really kickstart a project, and that is a project where we try to support people who live with painful diabetic neuropathy. My interests here include being an osteopath in clinical practice and education, which is one of the therapeutic modalities studied, as well as potentially standing to gain from a CPD course based on this project. So the new OST intervention is a multimodal intervention for people with painful diabetic neuropathy. And in its current form, that includes manual therapy. It's delivered by osteopaths, but I think we can expand that to physiotherapists and chiropractors, and we'll work on that in the near future. It includes a graded exercise program looking at stability, strengthening and cardiovascular activities, and it also has a strong element of psychologically informed pain management strategies, very much derived from acceptance and commitment therapy. We also integrate what I hope is best practice education around diabetes, neuropathic pain, including lifestyle advice, looking after your feet, things that are relevant for people with diabetic neuropathy. And I also hope that it can get integrated or work alongside usual medical care. So why are we doing this? And the reason really is that there's a huge gap in the care provision for people with diabetic neuropathy, which makes up about half of people with diabetes, and about a quarter of those go on to experience neuropathic pain from that condition. So it's a huge population, and talking to people with lived experience is part of this project, as well as from the literature. We know that physical limitations can be quite severe. It often impacts sleep, with symptoms being worse at night, and it can have huge mental health implications as well. Around the symptom burden, but especially further down the line with ulcerations and then amputations being one of the main complications, we also know that the social impact as well as the economic impact is pretty dramatic for diabetic neuropathy. Talking to people, there was really desperation for some kind of effective therapy, and the literature also tells us that the available drugs for neuropathic pain either come with quite prohibitive side effects or they don't work for a lot of people. So really a desire there for something, both from clinicians as well as from patients, to be able to offer something that provides some hope and hopefully also symptom relief in some form. We've also found that patients vary a lot in how much they know about neuropathy, including knowing about whether they have neuropathy. It's very inconsistently diagnosed. And certain dissatisfaction around the education, the information people are provided. What does it mean? How does it progress? Where does it come from? What can I do about it? And this is where I hope to bring back the narrative to the Society for Back Pain Research. In a population with diabetes, musculoskeletal pain, other sources of pain are also up to twice as common. Now, the approach to developing this intervention and to then testing it was very much a collaborative one, both in terms of academic collaboration, but also working with stakeholders, working with clinicians and working with patient partners. And the SPPR Travel Fellowship came quite early on in 2022 for this and really enabled me to do that kind of collaborative work, both in terms of visiting other academic collaborators and experts, as well as having some extra money to pay for PPI and not feel bad about asking for people's time, not being able to offer anything in return. So the first trip I did was to the beautiful city of Münster in Western Germany, visiting Professor Esther Pogatsky-Zahn, who is a pain specialist working largely in neuropathic pain and perioperative care. And I spoke to her and her team about a new intervention program that they'd set up at that time, and a large multi-center trial, so learning about that there. And I also engaged in other very taxing work here with my brother in that instance. I then went to Oxford. I didn't take any pictures on that trip, so this is from a different trip where I visited a couple of friends, including to write my PhD thesis. It's no surprise, by the way, that it's easy to get a PhD from Oxford when you're in these smart environments. It just flows much better. Apart from that, sorry to digress, apart from that, we spoke to Professor Anina Schmidt, who many of you will know, and her group around sciatica and neuropathic pain, really exploring potential intervention components and trying to hammer out the protocol for the feasibility trial. And I also connected with Dr. Esther Williamson, who, we've heard earlier, provide very important insight, I think, in terms of helping people with frailty and exercise programs around that, and with regards to the feasibility trial as well. So the intervention development approach we've used very much focused or based on the MRC's framework for complex interventions, which initially includes or initially focuses on developing a program theory that is sound. And in that case, it means informed by clinical and academic experts and informed by living experience experts or lived experience experts. Both people with pain and that condition, as well as clinicians who have had experience looking after these populations. We also drew on existing systematic literature reviews to identify potential intervention components and get an idea of their potential effects. And the next step then was iteratively refining that, and a big part of that is a feasibility trial, where we're trying to see if we can run an RCT, but also we have a huge qualitative component and gather information around the acceptability of the intervention, and also informing the next steps of refinement that are yet to come. A very important part of the intervention itself was the training program for clinicians, and this is our first cohort of the course that we delivered in January 2024, so last year. Fantastic group of qualified osteopaths who we've put through a day's worth of online lectures and self-directed learning, as well as a day of in-person training. And that was facilitated, for example, by Dr. Whitney Scott, a clinical psychologist from King's. We had our patient partner telling us about her experience. We had a neurologist, Matthew Evans from Imperial. Steve and me helped with some of the manual therapy and communication training. And it was really a fascinating and really engaged cohort, 10 of whom then went on to become clinicians, providers on the feasibility trial that I'm about to tell you next. So really a group that was instrumental in also then further refining some of the methods, as well as how we then put that program theory into practice. This is what the feasibility trial looks like on paper. It's a 3-armed study with NUOST NUOST delivered in 5 sessions, one-on-one, so quite resource-intensive at the moment by some of those clinicians. Sessions last usually 60 minutes. The first one is 90 minutes, compared to a control intervention, which resembles NUOST, but we've removed some of the components into the interest of which into the effects of which we're interested in. And it has a usual care arm of people who don't receive any care as part of the study. And we then follow up immediately after the treatment period and at 8 and 16 weeks. So we've just recruited the last patient for this study. We aimed at 36 participants in January, so hopefully we'll have the data in June ready to analyze. So that's the immediate next step for this program. But then I'm also writing an advanced fellowship application at the moment, where the idea is to refine that intervention, really make use of the information that we've gathered, and look at what can we do to make that treatment more accessible, studied at a larger scale, and ideally make it suitable to an NHS context. I also think it's really worthwhile exploring overlap and potential synergistic effects with multiple long-term conditions, such as musculoskeletal pain, mental health issues. Cardiovascular disease is also a big one in people who live with diabetes. And many of the intervention components, such as education, exercise, pain management skills, self-management, are also quite suitable, I think, for the management of some of those conditions. So I want to explore that opportunity further. With that, a huge thank you to the patient partners that were involved, the providers, and especially the research team, some of whom are here, including then the Society for Back Pain Research. Just to reiterate, this kind of travel fellowship is really a huge opportunity to get going with that, and led to quite a bit of extra or additional funding, not quite a bit, very considerable extra funding, and a few years of academic support. So thank you to the Society, and thanks for listening.
Any questions from the audience? Nope.
No, okay. Well, I think we'll move on then, David. I can't ask you a question because I'm on it. Thank you very much, David.
So we can call the next one the BOA Future Leaders Program. People Matt Lee, Surya Gandham, and Adam Lloyd.
Hello again, everybody. Thank you for the introduction. Mr. Surya Gandham sends his apologies. Unfortunately, he can't be here today, but I'll be presenting on his behalf. So for those of you who may be unfamiliar with the BOA Future Leaders Programme, myself, Matt and Surya were part of the 5th cohort. of the program, joining an alumni now of individuals who've gone on to achieve quite a bit, be it training program directors, clinical service leads. And I think for those of you who may not know what the Future Leaders Program is, this is a year-long program of 4 face-to-face forums covering 4 different aspects of leadership, supplemented by separate reflection and action learning. And the main domains covered are in regards to different aspects of being a clinical leader in personal, technical relation and contextual leadership. And I think I speak on behalf of all 3 of us when I express our heartfelt thanks to BAS and the BSS and the exec committees for kindly sponsoring us all through this process. The nice thing about the 3 of us doing the FLP is that we were actually at 3 separate points of our careers at the time. Myself, I was towards the end of my orthopedic training. Surya was a spinal fellow at the time, and Matthew was an early years consultant. And so from my perspective as a senior trainee, I think there are some aspects about being involved in the Future Leaders Program that was very appealing. In terms of what I enjoy doing, my interests are particularly in service pathway development, healthcare inequality, and this was a great way for me to be able to mature my understanding of how to get involved in some larger works beyond direct clinical care. That fed into what I'd like to achieve further on down my career, and I think when you're transitioning towards consultant practice, having an idea of what is different about you and what sets you apart from your peers is an important aspect, regardless of what your particular interests are. Showing a passion in something, I think, is an important aspect of that beyond direct clinical care. And as a trainee at the time, there has been some changes in the training programs across the joint colleges for surgical training. Now with the implementation of generic professional capabilities and capabilities in practice. And some of these do focus particularly more on leadership, team working, and aspects of quality improvement. From a trainee perspective, rotational training does not lend itself easily towards getting involved in good quality QI projects. When you move around from hospital to hospital every 6 months or so, it's difficult to be able to work within a particular area and enact real change. And surgical training is still very technical and procedural skill focused, and it's not really until you start to transition towards the end of your training and recognizing your role as a clinical leader, as a consultant surgeon, that you have to think about some different aspects of your leadership style and your skill set. So from my point of view, the Future Leaders Program provided me with a great deal of insight into my own strengths and weaknesses of my leadership style and how that can be amended, what my motivations are and behaviors. It gave me some great tools to work with for QI work and how to appropriately critique that. Some good work in terms of conflict resolution skills that will no doubt be an important aspect of my future career. And in terms of strategic planning and engaging with key stakeholders in management and other aspects when you're trying to invoke change. And I personally would very highly recommend the Future Leaders Program to anybody that was in a similar stage of training to I was at the time. In terms of Surya's experience, Surya attended the FLP as part of his second spinal fellowship. He felt that he had not had a great deal of formal leadership training, and he was wanting to take on some further leadership roles further down in his career. Wanted to learn some theory about how to implement leadership strategies and to help him in his consultant interviews, which is obviously subsequently been successful. And his colleagues previously from the FLP alumni have highly recommended the course. In terms of what he felt were highlights, he felt that the practical group sessions were excellent, as were the teachers who showed a great deal of enthusiasm for their work. Meeting new people and building up a network was another very key aspect for him. And in terms of his take-home messages, he thought that changing a leadership style, depending on the situation, can be valuable, understanding and appreciating his own communication style, and giving himself a sense of purpose. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. So as Adam mentioned, I'd already started as a consultant when I applied for the Future Leaders Programme. And at the time the programme commenced, at the beginning of its 12-month rotation, I've been a consultant for 21 months at that point. I think this gave me some unique insight compared to a lot of the other people who were on the programme, because the majority of people were not consultants, they were fellows or STA trainees. And I think that's probably what the programme is more geared towards. But as an early years consultant, there was I was approaching the programme from, rather than being told these are some fictional situations that you might run into in your career and these are strategies you can use to help navigate those situations, I was thinking, okay, at work I've got problems A, B and C, and how can I apply what I'm learning on this course to help overcome those real problems. So I think it was particularly useful from that point of view. I'd recently been appointed as governance lead and mortality lead at my trust, and there's not a lot of, you just sort of dropped into these roles without any real sort of background training or even previous experience as a trainee. So there was a lot of stuff that sort of helped me navigate the beginning of those roles as well. A big one was developing improvements within the department. When you start as a consultant, you're full of enthusiasm and you want to enact changes and make the department better. When you're going through your training, you're taught how to make decisions in clinic, how to do the operations, but a lot of the soft skill stuff like leadership and making logistical changes in your department and isn't something that's really taught or approached upon. So you can be going into that quite blind when you first start. So the Future Leaders Programme, provided me with a tool or skill set for interacting with the managers. An awareness of my own communication style and how that might affect other people, so both when trying to negotiate changes within your unit or how you communicate with staff in theatre, but most importantly a way of getting things done, which I think is something we all want to do. So a lot of the things that you're taught is about bringing team members towards a common goal, so getting people onto your side, overcoming roadblocks in a project, whether that be, personal relationships or financial roadblocks, whatever it is. Identifying key people within your organisation who can help you make those changes. So there'll be some people who will have a lot of presence in your day-to-day life, maybe from an executive point of view or a managerial point of view, but they might not be the right people to approach to help you enact changes in your unit. And lastly, mixing with like-minded people to forge lasting relationships. So about 32 people enrol each year, and you're split into 4 groups, and those groups are a group together within speciality, really. So all the spinal people were on the same group. And it's quite useful getting insight from people in different units, rather than your colleagues who you work with when you're trying to make changes, and just having a fresh set of eyes to help you overcome any of those roadblocks. So in summary, for me, I would say that the FLP was very valuable, and I'd like to thank BAS for sponsoring me on it. It certainly altered my way of thinking when I think about the organisation that I work in and how I'm going to make changes, in my unit. It is a beneficial experience for a new consultant, but it is really targeted at ST8s, fellows, and really year 1 consultant level. And I think although everyone would benefit from, leadership experience and coaching, I think the more senior you become, the less relevant the Future Leaders Programme becomes to more senior people. So I think I was probably sort of on the cusp, really, of getting the maximum out of the programme. Thank you very much. Has anyone got any questions?
Any questions from Matt? In which case, now that you become the leaders after attending this program, can I throw a question? And so that we can give a feedback to the BOE. So what are the changes that you are going to suggest as a leader for this program now to make it better?
Stunned silence. I think there was various aspects of the program that worked really well. And I think that ultimately it was the engagement of previous alumni and going on to see what they have gone on to do that, you know, I think highlighted to me that it's a valuable experience. It's an opportunity to be able to meet like-minded other individuals, and it gives you a sense of purpose, I think, going forward. As I say, from my, I think all of our perspective, I think it was a really useful exercise.
But I think your summary slide said it all, but I just want to throw the questions.
I think I'd second what Adam said. As part of the programme, they got various speakers in who may not have been previous FLP alumni. There were you know, past presidents of the BOA and, you know, lots of other people who shared their experiences with us, the good, the bad and the ugly. And I think, you know, there's a lot of theory teaching as well, and probably that is, you know, some people are really into that sort of stuff. But I found that speaking to real people who'd had, you know, bad or difficult experiences and how they tackled those was probably more useful. So probably more face-to-face time with people who've been through the mill.
Thank you.
So we're kind of on to the next section, which is an update on ongoing and early starting or proposed research that's going to be starting soon. It's a rapid session with each speaker given 5 minutes or so. There might be one speaker that hasn't registered, so it might be a little bit more time. So how I'm proposing to run the session is that each speaker will have 5 minutes. I'll stand up at 5 minutes because there isn't a clock on the podium for people. And then we'll take questions on individual studies at the end, should we have time, because I suspect people might run over a little bit. That's great. Hi, Ashley. Come on up. Ashley's up first. Could I ask the other speakers maybe just to come to the front of the auditorium if you're not there already? So Ashley's starting on the basis.
On both basis and praise together.
Yeah, I'll do them one at a time, yeah. So BASIS has been going for, we're in our 5th year now, so many people in the audience will be well aware of this study. Just as a general update for those who've not heard of it before, this is an RCT comparing comparing nighttime bracing against full-time bracing. It's a non-inferiority study asking the question whether nighttime bracing is non-inferior to full-time bracing in AIS in preventing curve progression to 50 degrees before skeletal maturity, using 50 degrees as our surrogate marker of surgery. We've got 21 sites open, so that's all the UK paediatric spine centres except for 3. And as of yesterday, 401 participants have been randomised into the study, and our target is 780, so still a long way to go. NIHR have approved a 20-month recruitment extension to October 2026, and at the same time agreed funding for BASIS 2, which I'll come to in just a second. So there's our recruitment at the moment by site. So we've got 3 big sites, quite a number of sites, over 20 patients so far, and then all the sites below. And every site is valuable. You know, you could imagine if we just had the 7, 8 sites at the top, we would be a long way behind where we are now. So all the sites are very valuable. And we're recruiting at about 0.6 patients a month. However, over the last 12 months, a very different view. So Alder Hey have done amazingly well. Well done for everybody in Alder Hey. And Evelina have come up as well. And then Sheffield and Birmingham have continued normal pace. we need to improve recruitment. I said, can we improve recruitment? We must. Our last 2 months have been pitiful. 8 patients and 6 patients over the last 2 months, and we need 15 a month to hit target. So can everyone who sees patients who may be eligible in clinics recruit them to BASIS? Assess what their preference might be, try and restore a bit of equipoise, and then refer the patient to the research team and the PI. And as a fail-safe, get your orthotists to flag any referrals who may be eligible. I'm not sure what we can do about clinic waiting times, but just do your best. BASIS 2 is the new study. A literature review identified that 30% of AIS patients progress after skeletal maturity, and surgeons therefore advise lots of different weaning protocols. So the aim of this study is an RCT, does 6 months additional bracing at skeletal maturity, reduce the risk of curve progression at 2 years. So this is all patients who reach skeletal maturity with a curve less than 50 degrees are eligible, so all BASIS patients, and they either get 6 months additional bracing or they stop bracing immediately. And we need 228 patients. So far, we've recruited 8, but the study's only been open a short time. First time I've seen a recruitment graph on target. Thanks for your support. We need every consultant in every centre to recruit. Please do your best. Thank you.
Well, Ashley, you actually finished ahead of time, so yeah, I know you've got another one to do. But are there any questions on the BASIS? I mean, last time we did this at BritSpine, the common theme across these were delayed recruitments and extensions. Yeah. So there's you know, we also just had a presentation about feasibility from David Schmidt. You know, what's the relationship between what happens in feasibility and recruitment, actually?
It's just hard. Everybody's got busy lives, and I get that. And it's just difficult because NIHR will give you a bit of flexibility, but generally they'll just shut you down. Yeah. You know, people who do research out there will know that, you know, these studies get shut down, and then we get a bad name because we get tarred with the brush that spinal surgeons can't recruit. You know, they can never complete a study, and then they're more reluctant to give money to the next study. So it's a knock-on, and all it does is it means that all our medical colleagues just get their studies funded because there's more money for them. Mm. So yeah, I think we've got to do this to support our specialty, really.
Okay. Thank you. So your second presentation is on the PRAISE trial.
Yeah, so PRAISE is the newest study, for me anyway. So this is pain relief after instrumented spine surgery, instrumented lumbar spine surgery, but then we'd lose PRAISE. So again, NIHR portfolio study. So don't forget that this brings in research capability funding into your trust. So your trust will very much like you doing this study. It's a post-operative pain relief trial after 1 or 2 level posterior instrumented lumbar fusions and plus or minus decompression. Elective surgery only. And the patients are randomized into one of 3 arms. So usual care, where you can also infiltrate some local anesthetic if you so wish. Intrathecal opiate, either given by the anaesthetist before surgery or by the surgeon during surgery. And of course, the main thing that they wanted us to look at, which is the erector spinae block. This is ultrasound guided at the level above the fusion, and it can be done before or after surgery. Different sites wanted to do different things. There is a training package available to train the anaesthetist up to do this, and it takes about 10 to 15 minutes. So we're planning to do this with the anaesthetist doing it because they've been trained, with the patient prone on the table before surgery. The study itself, the primary outcome is back pain on moving around the bed, sitting and or turning at 24 hours on a 0 to 100 VAS scale. It's powered to detect a 10-point difference between the two interventions, which is what our PPI group decided was a reasonable difference. Secondary outcomes, a few of those, all the ones you might expect, and the sample size of this is 152 in each group. So recruitment should be easy to start with because we've all got these patients on our waiting list and we can recruit them from the waiting list. Patient information sent after initial discussion, and the real discussion with the patient is the anaesthetic discussion around the intervention arms, which will probably be done at pre-op in most centres. Patients are obviously consented, complete their baseline questionnaires, and then are randomised a few weeks before surgery so that the intervention arm can be planned, because only certain anaesthetists will be able to do the erector spinae blocks. Recruitment, as you can see, we're already a bit behind, regular theme. Recruitment's over 16 months, and with end of follow-up planned shortly after recruitment because it's a study only to 6 weeks post-op. We need 25 sites, recruiting about 18 patients a site, which is about 1 to 2 a month. And you can see on the table there that we currently have 4 sites open, 3 of whom have recruited, and quite a number of sites in setup, and quite a number of sites who've expressed an interest who haven't got up to the setup stage yet. Thank you to all the sites who are participating. These are the spinal surgeons involved, so myself and Martin as co-aps. Thanks to Nafis, who sits on the trial steering committee, and Sam on the data monitoring committee, and the PIs at the open sites are also there. Thank you very much. And Pal, of course, is on the stage. Contact us if you want to become a recruiting site. We're looking for more. So instrumented lumbar spine fusion, 1 or 2 levels, plus or minus decompression, elective surgery. Thank you.
So colleagues do contact Ashley. I mean, part of this is about promoting involvement.
Aprajay wants one question. Careful.
Oh, geez.
Before Aprajay comes to that, one question, sorry.
We've only got time for one question, right?
The erector spinae block, when you do that, why did you choose before or after if the surgery prolongs? Will that be okay after, before the surgery? And the second one is, if you do the intrathecal opiate, and if you were to have a dural tear, which can happen in 10% in a fusion or stenosis surgery, will you still count for your study because will it not go away?
Yeah. So the intrathecal opiate I'm doing at the level above, and I'm going to give it myself. So just sort of not blind, well, sort of semi-blind through the flavum at the level above. It's very easy to do. I wouldn't personally do it at the decompression level. When you take the needle out, you see a little spurt of CSF, which is never good. The intrathecal opiate, the erector spinae block, the people who do it before say that it's better to do it before because the tissue plane's there, even though it's a few hours before it's actually needed. Whereas those that do it after will say, I'd rather do it after the surgery so that it acts 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Aprajay.
To get the anesthetist to do the blocks. Why are you not letting surgeons do it? Because you have the recruiting pack. Equally can be done. So what's the problem?
Yeah. I mean, the surgeons can learn to do it, and this is not my bit of the trial, the block bit, but apparently it's better done under ultrasound. Yeah, I did ask why we couldn't do it under X-ray control, drop a needle down onto the TP and do it. And to be honest, in implementation terms, that may be well how it goes. But as a surgeon, I was kind of voted down by the anaesthetists.
All right, thank you.
It's really bad.
For want of time, can we ask the questions afterwards to Ashley? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Do you mind?
Thanks very much.
Sorry about it, Ashley. I know it's raising interest. Can we call Kathy Price to come and present her radical trial, please? Thank you very much.
Sorry, I'm more of a midget. Okay, I want to say thank you very much for a great conference. I haven't seen any other pain consultant buddies here, and I'll recommend they consider it in the future. So I'm just briefly giving an oversight of the RADICAL trial, which is denervation for chronic and moderate to severe low back pain. That is an HTA-funded grant, and I completely empathise with Ashley about everything about recruitment, extensions, etc., which has been my experience as well. Denervation has had a checkered history. In 2008, the Nice Low Back Pain guidance effectively said, don't do it. This was then changed in 2016 to do it, but it needs research. HTA were looking at commissioning research, then along came the MINT trial, which had a few flaws with it. NICE looked at that, HTA looked at that and carried on to commission this trial. So I'm part of a Bristol team, I'm from Southampton, but the Bristol team is largely leading on this trial. So this is what the trial looks like. I'm not going to spend a long time getting through this busy graph. What I would say is that after the pilot phase, we made an awful lot of amendments to make it simpler, recruitment easier, and reduce the questionnaire burden. We need to recruit 250 patients all in all from 20 pain clinics. We were very open to having spinal surgeons in this trial, but we've not come across any who've been wanting to do the trial. Okay, I'm just running through in terms of eligibility to the trial. Really very standard inclusion, so moderate to severe back pain. It's a clinical decision as to whether they should be listed for diagnostic block and then whether they go on a waiting list for radiofrequency denervation. The main thing, though, is that they have a positive response to a single diagnostic block. We met as a team and agreed through consensus process that this needed to be 60% pain relief at 3 hours. And so you get a response very quickly, you need to follow them up very quickly, and that really helps define who actually should be eligible. You get very reliable pattern response. They then listed for RFD by their clinical care team. Exclusion criteria, this is where we've run into real challenges, and I think this talks to the work that was presented by Peter Sullivan and Jonathan Hill, that a lot of patients are coming through not really having had, I would say, best practice care earlier on in the pathway, so people are turning up on these lists with severe anxiety and depression, which by a consensus of every guideline you look at on this is not a good idea. So what's happened to them upstream, we looking at it, it doesn't look like they're getting the right care. Other common confounders or things that are making people ineligible are that there are an awful lot of repeat injections done on lists, and that back surgery, again, is fairly common. So those are the common reasons why people are excluded from the trial. We standardised the procedure. This is work that done through Bristol, and Natalie Blenko in Bristol has really helped standardise surgical trials. So we used 2 consensus publications and approach, and then got together the 20 interested sites and agreed a consensus, which we published. And then in terms of technique, everybody that's taking part in the trial has either had to attend a cadaver course or watch a training video, and needle positions checked for accuracy by either myself or an orthopaedic colleague. In terms of recruitment, it has been tough, really tough. First of all, we had the pandemic. We started off in 2019, just about to open, and then the pandemic hit. It took 2 years to recover from that. We opened towards the end of 2022 and recruited some sites, but then majority recruited between 23 and 24. Really, I haven't got nice circles as Ashley did, but you can see that some of the sites do a lot of the heavy lifting. But as Ashley said, every site is important to us. And some have been absolutely very quiet, such as Bart's, for example, didn't do anything for almost a year. And then suddenly they've really picked up and recruited 6 patients in a month. So I would say just keep the sites going. Where are we in our flow charts? This is our wibbly-wobbly flow chart. You can see that we're coming, I hope, towards the end. We're all very worried about the deviation off, but actually I've had an update from the sites that quite a few have recruited in the past month or so I think we'll be back on track. That's with newsletters, evening drinks parties, investigators meetings, whatever it takes. My learning and challenges, some sites have no capacity to set up trials. Are we maxed out on our sites? NHR-funded studies have been fed back as low priority as the profit is not there for trusts. Patients with us can have the treatment anyway, so it's quite hard yards persuading patients to go into a trial. I'm surprised, actually, and amazed at how altruistic many of the patients are. I talked about anxiety and depression already. That needs identifying way upstream. We found that the MSK services, the community ones, their patients are less likely to be complex and a good recruitment source. And as I said, it's important to keep the sites motivated. I'm not going to have any questions because I know we have to move on.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Kathy. Really good to see that trial going ahead after those last nice guidelines. So next up is wins the prize for the most complex acronym with the Forensic UK study.
It's a receipt.
No,
it's a receipt.
Yeah, no. Yeah. It's not. It's receipt first, I'm sorry. It's receipt. And Ali.
Yeah, thank you. So my name is Ali. I'm one of the resident orthopedic doctors in the Northwest and one of the trial managers for reseed myelopathy. So this is one of the first regenerative medicine trials for DCM, and essentially it's a phase 3 two-arm randomized controlled trial looking at ibudilast as the investigational medical product. And Dr. Mark Cotter at Cambridge is the chief investigator for this trial. So very briefly about DCM. With the chronic compression that we get the neuroinflammation, we get demyelination, neuronal loss. Decompressive surgery is the only treatment we do have for this condition. There is some recovery after this, and it's typically thought to be due to the patient's own intrinsic recovery capacity with remyelination and the neuroplasticity. However, less than 5% do make a full recovery after this. So one of our key goals is to kind of augment this to see if we can promote regeneration for this condition. So a bit about ibudilast. What is it? So it's a phosphodiesterase 3/4 inhibitor. Preclinical studies, it's shown good outcomes in terms of promoting axonal outgrowth and remyelination, and also has anti-inflammatory properties as well. It's currently undergoing some clinical trials in MS and motor neuron disease for these properties which it does exhibit as well. Good news, it's not a brand new drug. It is being repurposed. So for the past 20 years, particularly in Japan and East Asia, it has been used for asthma and stroke, particularly dizziness post-stroke as well. So it has shown a good safety profile for in its time of use as well. So essentially the trial, to achieve 85% power, we need to recruit 362 participants. Patients with myelopathy that we're recruiting, the moderate to severe myelopathy, so an MJO of between 8 to 14, and it's an adjuvant to surgical decompression. So we're hypothesizing that it will work hand in hand with the surgical decompression. So 10 weeks prior to surgery, patients can start, if they are randomized and included in this trial, they can start the ibudilast, they'll have their surgery, and they can continue it for up to 24 weeks after the surgery. So in total, there'll be up to 34 weeks enrolled in the trial. Primary outcomes will be the MJOA that we have, and also VAS for neck pain. We do have a number of secondary outcome measures. Some are optional, including some of our novel digital endpoints, which we are trialing in this as well, which hopefully it can help with future clinical trials as well. Current status, so we are currently recruiting at Cambridge and UCLH. King's will hopefully be shorting us very shortly. There have been some sites that have expressed some interest as well, but I think the main theme of this speech is, if you are dealing with myelopathy patients, if you are operating on them, performing surgical decompression, please do get in touch, because we would be delighted to have you all on board as well for this trial. But yeah, just a big thanks for our funders. NIHR Medicinova is supporting the trial, providing the ibudilast as well. But thank you very much.
Any questions for Rashid? No? Then we invite Professor Sachin Hoja to give on the forensic trial.
Can I ask a question for Rashid?
Yeah.
Can this not be tagged along with Polyfix? Sites that are already open for Polyfix? No, not to include patients for your trial.
I can answer. I'm Stefan. I work on both trials in Cambridge. I'm the clinical for Polyfix, but yes, you can. And we've been running the 2 trials in Cambridge successfully for the last couple of years, and the 2 cohort of patients seem to be different.
Is it? Okay, I didn't go through the
inclusion of 2. So yeah, I think it is very successful to run the 2 trials in one of the same trusts.
Okay.
Yeah.
So your interested sites are only already open recruiting for Polyfix. So yeah, like Cardiff also, we'd love to.
Yes, absolutely, and we're happy to work with the teams to set this up.
Okay.
But they're 2 very different, and Polyfix, they can go very well together. The 2 trials, and we haven't had much issues with that.
Okay.
In Cambridge.
Great, thank you. Sorry.
You've taken 2 minutes of your presentation. No, just kidding.
Hi, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to present about forensic. We talked about it in our previous meetings. This is the trials team. You can see that this has been run by the Oxford Trials Unit. And I purposely got Odette on stage. Odette's the trial manager, so that you can see who she is, because she's going to be chasing you apart from me. And if there are any queries, any questions, please reach out to us, both Odette and I, so that we can help you out. My co-chief investigator is David Beard, who's based in Oxford, and I, of course, introduced Odette. So basically, it's a superiority trial for patients who are presenting with chronic low back pain, to look at the cost effectiveness and physical function by using the ODI as a primary outcome measure. So the inclusion criteria: patients who've got back pain for more than 6 months. I could go through this, it'll take some time, but they've got a pain score which is more than 6. They have undergone, so if you look at your back pain pathway, these patients have gone through the triage and treat box. Patients have got 1 or 2 level disease, and their pain is predominantly in the back. And you may have used SPECT-CT as a modality of investigation, or any other modality of investigation, but the core one is MRI. And patients should be suitable for surgery. The exclusion criteria: any nerve-related symptoms, any nerve-related surgery, direct or indirect decompression is an exclusion. Patients who've had previous lumbar fusion surgery are an exclusion. Patients who've got pain all over and along with the back, but generalized pain worse than the back pain, they're excluded. Obviously, patients who have got who may need stabilization for any reason, like infection, tumor, trauma, those are excluded. And anybody who's got spondylolisthesis, which is grade 2 or above, is excluded. So grade 1 spondylolisthesis is an inclusion. So the other aspect for inclusion that our physio leads, Jim Greenwood and Mike Reddington, have put together is not just having the triage and treatment, which is the core therapy, but we've added another layer, and we've called it the Physio Plus model. So these patients would have had the basic core therapies, but then on top, they could have had facet injections, pain management. They could even have had CPPP, for that matter. So some other layer of treatment before these patients would be considered for the trial. For recruitment, we've got the QRI team from Bristol who are going to help us out to find out what barriers we have from recruitment point of view. As you've heard consistently, recruitment is an issue, and I'm already getting trepidations about it, about the recruitment, because that is going to be a huge issue. So we just need to be mindful of that, and we've heard this consistently in all the previous presentations as well. I'll hand over to Odette to tell you where we are with the study.
Thank you. So we're doing very well with getting interest from sites. We've got 15 sites already lined up. We've got 5 that are in setup ready for our final rec approval to go ahead, and they've got plenty of documents ready. We've got R&D support in all of the 15 sites, and we've been very lucky that we've been a very welcomed study. We obviously want to keep going. We need to get up to 20 or above sites. We're looking at the major hospitals plus the smaller hospitals, and we're looking at possibly, if we need to, a PIC site, but we don't really want to go down that line. So anybody that's interested in this fusion versus best conservative care study, it's really interesting. It's been a very welcome study throughout the country, and we'd like to promote it further and get the patients. We need to recruit 270 patients over about the 20 sites. Thank you.
More than 20 sites. So every site is welcome. So we got time for questions? Or
Time
I use my
one
slot.
question if there is one. Yeah, I just think it's great. In a way, this is another trial coming out of the last NICE guidelines.
Yeah,
So
this is based on the
great.
NICE guidelines. Yeah,
Fusion. Ashley, yeah?
Yeah, Ashley Cole, Sheffield. Just one quick question. Is it fair to say that this is the last chance saloon for a research trial for fusion for back pain?
At least in my career. Like I honestly, like last trial was Jeremy's trial. Jeremy sat here, 2005, right? It's taken us 20 years to get here. So imagine if this trial finishes in 28 or whenever it is, you'll be looking at 2048. I don't know how many I won't be there.
And if you remember, the NICE guidance says that spinal fusion should only take place in the context of a randomized controlled trial at the moment, in theory.
Correct, but it depends what the trial comes out.
For this population. Yeah.
No, but what comes out as a result of this trial would shape future management.
I hope it will be a definitive trial. Yeah.
Good luck.
Great, thank you so much.
So, hoping I'm getting the order right this time. Is Stefan Jordanov ready to go?
Polyfix.
Thanks, Stefan. Polyfix DCM trial. Thanks, Stefan.
Yes, hello everybody. Hi, my name is Stefan Jordanov, one of the neurosurgical research fellows and a registrar in Cambridge. I'm working along Mr. Cotter and Ben Davies on a few of trials, including RECEDE, as you heard a little bit hour ago, and Polyfix, to continue the theme about fixation and fusion. So Polyfix is a study looking at patients with DCM, and specifically the ones who have operation from the back of the neck, and they have laminectomy of two or more levels. The intervention is fusion or no, of the question most likely. And we're looking at whether this would change their management. The primary outcome is MJOA, which is functional, and we also have multiple secondary outcomes such as cost, quality of life, pain, imaging as well, X-ray. We're looking to recruit quite a few patients, so we need support of every site. It's been the team so far. So everybody here treats DCM, and so I'm not going to go into details. We have our guidelines when to offer surgery for DCM. CSM surgery covers a little bit when we go from the back or from the front. Really, Polyfix sits here at, answering a sub-question whether we use fusion or not in the context of cervical laminectomy. The WFLS in 2018 summarized the evidence, and it crystallized that there is no good evidence to suggest either or. So all of these are recommended. And not unexpectedly, the practice is quite mixed, as you can see from the HA's database survey for 2019. And there is a mix of pretty much 50-50 split between laminectomy and fusion, and it's very much surgeon practice dependent or site dependent. So what are the arguments for fixation? It is said to preserve alignment and stability. and radiologically reduce kyphosis, and some studies suggest pain improvement. There is also the concept of dynamic or delayed spinal cord injury and stretch. As we know, compression on the spine is not the only thing happening that causes myelopathy, and as you can see that from this dynamic MRI scan that shows the clear compression after an extension MRI. What about laminectomy alone? It's less expensive for sure. It's less complex, much quicker operation, less morbid for the patients as well. And sometimes, even if patients develop this kyphosis postoperatively, doesn't make clinical relevance to them. In terms of research in the field, since Polyfix has started, the Swedish registry study have produced a paper comparing retrospective data on patients who underwent fusion or laminectomy alone. It seems like there is very little difference between the two groups, unless the cost effectiveness. Fusion is much more expensive. So our trial hypothesis is whether fusion improves neurological recovery following surgery for 2 or more levels for DCM. It's a progressive trial. Everybody who's got myelopathy and has been scheduled for the cervical laminectomy of 2 or more levels can be included, and it's got MRI features of myelopathy. It's going to be 1-to-1 block randomization per site, and we look out to get 394 patients. And our pilot is long gone. We've been open now for 2.5 years. To try and help with the study as much as possible and reduce the burden on local teams, we've decided to reduce as much as possible the burden on the follow-ups. So local teams are very much involved up until the point of surgery, and afterwards they follow their normal follow-ups really, and a central team are guiding most of that follow-up afterwards. So a little bit of update where we're at the moment. We've recruited 198 patients so far. We have a few of the sites, as you can see, which are very high recruiters. We are going a little bit behind our NHR targets. The good news is that we've been given a 6-month extension of our trial, so we are now open up until May 2026. So we have a little bit more time to deliver that trial, and we're hopeful that time will be enough, especially with a few more international sites now coming on board, and hopefully will be open very soon. But we really need all the support for UK sites on this. If anybody wants to get in touch, there's still time, or if you have any questions, or if you have any trainees that want to get involved, Associate PI, we're very scheme is open for our trial, and very eager to help anybody to go with that. All right, I'm happy to have any questions.
Thank you.
We've got time for a question, if there is one.
Yes, Kaushik.
Just wanted to ask you, do you need to have equipoise? Because sometimes, looking at the scan, you decide, no, this is for fixation.
Yes, that's a very good question. And yes, so part of the reason why we have difficulties recruiting, obviously you have these patients that you go posteriorly, definitely go for fixation, or you'll definitely say this is a no-go for fusion. So you have this small amount in between that you'll be like, I can do this fusion or not. And this is the patient population we're looking at, where we can get involved and get them recruited to the study. Patients are very eager to get involved, and very happy to be involved, from my experience though. But yeah, of course, this is a challenge, and yeah, we're losing patients because one of them will be fusion, definitely. One of them will be no, not so much.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Stefan. Thank you. Next one is David Baxter here. Or anyone for the IMPRESS trial? No. If that is the case, then we'll go to Stephen Priest for the below trial.
Okay, so I'm Steve Priest. I'm a Professor of Biomechanics and Rehabilitation at the University of Salford, which is just down the road. So I've no conflicts of interest to declare. So we know that people with low back pain exhibit overactivity of the paraspinal muscles and the abdominal muscles during functional tasks. And this overactivity will increase stress on the joints, irritate nerve roots, and potentially cause muscle spasm. And together, those factors are likely to exacerbate back pain. But what's driving this muscle overactivity? Well, we think probably psychological factors play a role, so sort of fear-related bracing. But we also think there's a biomechanical mechanism that should be targeted by physiotherapy interventions. So we see overactivity of the paraspinal muscles as a compensatory mechanism. And we're viewing this within the context of what we call postural muscle tone. And that's the ongoing low-level muscle activity that supports us against gravity. And we think modern lifestyles lead to a sort of increase in the tone or the tension at the front of our bodies. And that what happens then is that the body is then required to activate the paraspinal muscles to compensate and to restore gaze alignment. And what happens there is that you end up with this tug of war between this anterior tone at the front of the body and the paraspinal activation at the back, and that sort of compresses the spine. Now, alongside that biomechanical mechanism, we think there's psychological factors that will also shape the pain experience. So things like catastrophizing, fear of movement, anxiety are all related to low back pain. And in addition, research has now shown that those psychological factors are also related to muscle overactivity. So people who catastrophize more show higher levels of overactivity during walking. So we've developed a new treatment which we call cognitive muscular therapy, and the idea is to integrate psychologically informed physiotherapy within a biomechanical framework which is aimed at reducing this overactivity of the paraspinal muscles. And the key difference here between existing physiotherapy interventions and our treatment is that we've created a set of clinical techniques which allow people to sort of get experiential learning of what it feels like to move and to stand with lower levels of muscle tone and reduce this compensatory paraspinal muscle activity. We integrate psychological techniques and a whole range of the techniques that sort of Peter Sullivan was talking about earlier this week. And we also use EMG biofeedback to show patients what's happening in the muscles of the low back, and that provides validation and also allows us to guide muscle retraining. So we did a small pilot study before our main trial, which showed relatively large reductions in Roland-Morris, and also that we were able to reduce muscle activity during walking. So you can see that period there between the sort of foot contact events during walking, that actually reduced slightly. So our study now is funded by the NIHR. It's a 2-year study. It's got 2 aims. The first is to develop a physiotherapist training course to allow us to upskill physiotherapists to deliver this new intervention. And the second is to run a feasibility trial which will inform planning of a future large-scale randomized trial which will compare our treatment to best practice psychologically informed physiotherapy. So we finished our training course package now. We've created 16 hours of online learning. We've got 2 face-to-face training days, and we've observed the physiotherapists, 4 physiotherapists delivered to patients, and used the feedback from the patients, the physios, and our observations to refine our training course. We got good outcomes from the physios during that training course. It's obviously a very small sample. And now what we're doing is we're planning and hoping to start the feasibility study in a couple of months' time. We'll get 90 patients. They'll be randomized into 2 arms. One will receive our CMT intervention, and the other arm will receive best practice psychologically informed physiotherapy. We want people to be fairly severe, so we're sort of looking at screening people with the start back tool and looking at those who are at high risk of a poor long-term outcome, and that they have to score 4 or more on a numerical scale for pain. We're going to follow people up at 20 weeks and 8 months from baseline, and we've got the sort of outcomes for Roland-Morris, pain catastrophizing, pain self-efficacy, and other outcomes related to health economic analysis. So we're hoping this trial will be finished and we'll be able to present the results at next year's conference. Okay, any questions?
Any questions from the floor? Can I ask one, Steve?
Yeah, go for it.
You know, feasibility studies now, the focus of the outcomes are around feasibility. for reasons we've talked about this morning already, about recruitment, acceptability of intervention and things, and less about comparing arms. How does that, I got the feeling this was about comparing.
Maybe I've not presented, maybe I've tried to present what the future trial will look like if this is shown to be feasible. So for us, the feasibility is around being able to recruit from the GPs and being able to recruit from the physiotherapy clinics. That's one of the key outcomes of the trial. And also just to make sure that patients find the intervention acceptable and that we can get good adherence. But we've already created and delivered this intervention to people with knee osteoarthritis, and we've got really good acceptability. So I think that'll be less of an issue. I think it's more about whether we can keep people in the trial. So it's that retention and recruitment really that are the key outcomes in the feasibility. So I should have made that clearer.
Thanks very much. Okay. So next is from Jeremy Fairbank, who, Jeremy, I know beforehand expressed my concerns about the timing for these things. We've got a little bit more time now. Because there's someone, I don't think we'll go to half an hour, no.
No. Anyhow, thank you very much for inviting me to this. And I'm going to be talking about a new approach to screening for idiopathic scoliosis. I've no conflicts to admit to. This is just a summary slide of the main players in this. I probably left off a few names, but it does involve a large number of centres, and I'm going to try and explain a bit how we've got to this place. I've been involved in looking at automated annotation of spinal imaging for over 10 years now, which is a bit alarming. We started off with lumbar MRI scans with Genodisc and Twins UK. And we moved on to scoliosis in a collaboration with Emma Clark in Bristol, who had done a lot of work on the ALSPAC birth cohort. And she'd worked out a way of annotating scoliosis from the DEXA scans, but it was very time-consuming and difficult to do. And we have automated that, and that's taken a long time to get that right and to get it validated. And I'm going to talk about a different way of approaching scoliosis from the traditional model. And the reason for this is really Ashley's trial, and he's had these issues with recruitment that we've talked about, but one of the issues is that so many of his patients have got scoliosis or present with scoliosis too much to be managed by brace methods. So I'm going to talk through some of the aspects of this. Now, this is Ashley's slide, and they looked at their waiting list. 73% of patients presented with a Cobb angle of more than 50 degrees, which is outside the range of the non-operative care. And they looked at COVID, waiting list issues, and social deprivation as issues, but the problem is that the condition's just been diagnosed too late. Sorry, there's more buttons. So, in effect, this means that 3/4 of the patients finding their way to secondary care for management have lost the opportunity of non-operative care. And currently, early diagnosis and the screening attempts, which go back to the 1960s, are variants of the Adams-Ford bending test. Now, these are data from UK Biobank, and without going through the whole trail, we've been able to annotate both MRI and DEXA images. And from that, we can have a measure of curvature, or Cobb angle, as is widely known. It's not quite the same as Cobb angle, and axial rotation. And these two values are strongly related in idiopathic scoliosis, and this has been shown in a number of other studies. But if you look at the bottom bottom left-hand corner of this graph, there are a group of people with small curves, but a large amount of rotation. So they would have a positive forward bend test, but that would be a false positive, and the other way round, where there's very little rotation, but a significant scoliosis, and they tend to get missed, so they're false negatives. And I think, without being able to absolutely prove this, this is one of the important contributors to our inability to pick up the early cases with scoliosis. Now, one of the things about ALSPAC is that they did DEXA scans on the participants, or the ones who were prepared to have the DEXA scans, every 2 years from age 9 up to 17. And then they did another scan at 24. And these people are now in their mid to late 30s, and there's hope to recruit them. But I think anyone can see that this individual started off with a reasonably straight spine, developed a typical right-sided curve, and was then identified and had surgery. The identification is nothing to do with ALSPAC, that's just to do with ordinary NHS care. So we've been looking, and this is becoming more widely used, in these large cohorts like UKB, at a polygenic risk score, which is a method of looking at the genomic contribution to a condition, in this case, scoliosis. So it's not actually identifying individual genes, but these are GWASs and looking at multiple points through the whole genome. And to do this, we need to have ways of phenotyping the deformities. So you can see here a list of phenotypes that we've been able to establish. And there are various reasons for doing so many different ones, but the key ones are obviously the main curve and curve axial rotation. We also need to discover better ways of finding the sagittal profile, because that's thought to be a predictive factor of progression, and that's an important part of this. So our objective, which is ambitious and beyond the scope of just what I'm talking about today, but is to get scoliosis screening approved by the National Screening Committee. So far, it's consistently failed for various reasons, which we could perhaps talk about for this time. We've got access to 3 main data sets. So in a way, recruitment is not the issue here, but each of these studies is designed in a different way. So ALSPAC is a birth cohort that started off with pregnancies, and that demonstrates a scoliosis prevalence of just under 6%. Most of the existing studies say that scoliosis has a prevalence of somewhere between 1% and 4% or 3%, depending on what method you use.
1 minute.
We finished?
1 minute, yeah.
UK Biobank has a much higher prevalence if you look at the imaging, but only 0.8% by record linkage. So my final slide is this one, which is really looking at other ways of identifying a population at risk. And so in young children, that might be based on family history. Delayed walking is something discovered from ALSPAC. And in the older ones, reduced capacity to perform at sports in primary school. And then we get into the ones where there's low BMI, and DEXA itself has got predictive factors. So we have to pull together the polygenic score and this phenotypic score to develop a screening program. So this is complicated, and this is just the stage that we've got to in this process. Thank you.
Any questions? Shall we move on to the next? I mean, we can ask questions to all the people after the next one, so that if I have the trial people sitting in the front, it'll be easy to come and answer as well. So the next one, we invite Siddharth Vankipuram to come and deliver on the Swiss trial.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Siddharth Vankipuram, and I'm the research lead for the BAS trainee subcommittee, and we would like to invite you to participate in our study for this year, which is quite a relatively simple study, which is looking at sustainability in spine surgery, or Swiss. I have no disclosures. We know that sustainability in healthcare is of growing importance. NHS England, which is of course going to be changed based on the news, has pledged to go net zero by 2045. My trust at UCLH has much more radical targets. They're planning to go net zero by 2030. And this has both environmental and financial implications in general. And there are some eye-opening figures when I was doing some literature survey on this. And one OR suite in the UK produces carbon emissions, which is equivalent to 2,000 homes, or one OR suite in the UK per day produces carbon emissions equivalent to a family of 4 per week. Or my favorite, which is one OR suite in the UK, produces the same amount of carbon emissions as flying from London to Edinburgh every day. The NHS produces a lot of waste. It produces about 5% of waste of the entire UK, and it's the largest public sector producing carbon emissions. As surgeons, we can't control a lot of the waste that is being generated, such as the electricity, the ventilation, or the heating. But certainly from the surgical side of things, there are a few things that we can look at. And literature has shown that most of the waste that is being generated is hazardous waste that accounts for 70%, and the recyclables only account for about 3 to 5%. And why that's important is that from an environmental perspective, hazardous waste generates much more carbon dioxide emissions as compared to the recyclables, which generate much less. And from a trust perspective, that's important from a financial sense, because disposing hazardous waste is much more costlier than disposing general waste. Studies have also shown that it is possible to reduce waste in the OR, and that study from 2016 showed that we could potentially reduce waste in the OR by up to 60% just by simple and easy segregation of the waste, so each waste goes in the right bag. Sustainability is not new, and if you look at all the other fields, the BOA, for example, had their annual congress in 2023, which was based on sustainable systems. They have a sustainability fellow or a traveling fellow who I think was based out of Birmingham. There have been studies from from Brighton looking at environmental sustainability in orthopedic surgery, as well as in other fields of surgery. Anesthetics is quite big, obstetrics and gynecology, ophthalmology and dermatology are others that I have seen. But when you're looking at purely from a spine surgery perspective, I could find 2 studies. One was from Manchester that looked at the entire waste generated per lumbar microdiscectomy, and they looked at the cost and the carbon dioxide emission for one patient undergoing lumbar microdiscectomy, right from pre-op outpatient follow-up to post-op follow-up. And one study from neurosurgeons in America that looked a little bit at what amount of waste is being generated by not using certain disposable equipment. So really, we don't have any studies that actually are defining or measuring the amount of waste that's coming, and so that's the purpose of this study, which essentially is to look at the waste that is being produced from either a single-level lumbar decompression and or discectomy, and a single-level ACDF with or without plate. And ideally, what we want to do is to define the environmental burden of waste generation in spinal surgery. The primary outcome is quite simple. We want to measure what the waste is being produced, and how that could potentially be useful in the future is that we can then see whether if we apply certain waste segregation methods, whether we can further reduce the amount of hazardous waste being generated and increase the amount of recyclable wastes being generated. The materials and methods are quite simple. We hope to start from April of 2025, and I've spoken to a few of the trainees, especially to get involved, aiming for about 20 lumbar decompressions and 20 ACDFs per site. And it's just for primary surgery, so any revision surgeries or surgery on the thoracic spine is not included. Most trusts can be similar, but there can be obviously different waste categorization methods from different trusts. So it just categorized your waste into dry, non-hazardous waste, which typically goes in the black bag. Hazardous waste, which is the biggest carbon dioxide emitter, goes in the orange bag. You have your recyclables, which go in the white bag, the sharps that go in your sharp box, and linens, which may or may not be there in every trust, which typically goes into green bag. And all we need to do is you do the case, and at the end of the case, we can send you this, and you measure the waste. And that's all we need to do, and you send us that for 20 patients, and it's more or less done. And the idea is that we define what is the waste that is being produced from all of these cases. And so if you get about 10 or 15 units and you're getting 200 cases of each, we can say that on an average, this is what is the waste that is being generated. And then further studies can look at ways to kind of, bring down that amount. Yeah, so if anyone is interested, I'd please request you to get in contact. You can email that or even contact me, and then we can hopefully get some patients recruited. Thank you.
The BAS trainee group are doing quite well with the CLIP study, and now this one, so if you can encourage in your units, it'll be very useful for the BAS trainees, and this can go on for every year, actually.
All right.
Very good. And now the questions for all the trials. Anyone?
Can I just ask a question of this last one? Just how I'm just over here.
Oh, yes.
That's all right. I was just wondering, how did you decide on how many sites you're going to include in this prospective
We have not
study?
decided, so as many sites as possible will obviously be as helpful. So there's no, I said the number per site was about 20, so that is to reduce the amount of heterogeneity, because obviously some people may do an ACDF with plate or without plate, with the integrated screws or just a standalone cage. So
And do you know how many sites there are in the country?
a lot. And I'm not sure the entire number, no.
Because you could do a calculation to figure out how many sites you need.
Yeah.
Be good, yeah.
Any questions for
any of the presenters?
Or any of the presenters, yeah. If not, then I'll ask the same question that Sachin asked for the other trial. To you as well, Sachin and Ashley, because you find it, the recruitment is very difficult, yeah? The same question that was asked last time. Because you both are doing the same fusion, same kind of surgery, the trials. Can you take the same patients or use the same centers? Why don't you approach those centers and then get them to do that? But the only problem with that will you be able to get the outcome sheet so that you don't give more paperwork for them to do and mix, and somewhere you can come as an informal arrangement? Is it possible?
Inclusion-exclusion criteria is definitely possible. Forensic patients would be eligible for praise. In terms of combining, yes, possibly. I'd have to admit that I've not looked at it, but there would obviously be some questionnaires that would be used in both studies, and some that would be independent for each study. But yeah, the patient, that would be possible. And neither of us have put in the rec that they can't be taking part in another study. Rec usually asks, it's a question that they always ask. So yeah.
Can I invite any other questions? Yes, Lisa, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for some really interesting presentations. And it's a question to Ashley about praise. If I understood you right, your primary outcome was pain moving around the bed area from 0 to 100 visual analog scale. And I just wondered why you chose that outcome measure, and if patients want to reduce their pain, will they not be encouraged to just sit there? So the more they move, the more they might have some discomfort, and therefore, is that going to be possible to discern that from your measurements? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a really tricky one, outcome measure after surgery. And we did look at the research. There's a whole load of systematic reviews on pain relief after lumbar spine surgery. More than I'd care to think should be in the literature, but they're there. And it's just trying to find an outcome measure and a common outcome measure. So most people say, well, it's pain relief, but then some patients at 24 hours are sat out, some patients are not sat out. It's really tricky. Personally, I wanted to use quality of recovery because I kind of like things that have a number of domains, but I got outvoted. Quality of recovery is a secondary outcome.
Any other questions from the floor?
Anybody? For the sustainability study, the SUI study, for that, Siddharth. So how is that, the amount of weight, I mean, these are all repeated on so many studies as you've shown. So how is your study going to differ from others?
I think,
apart from just, I mean, the difference in the surgery itself, because you're measuring the same commodity there.
yes, I mean, but just that we haven't actually had anything in spine surgery particular. So there have been a lot of studies in orthopedic surgery and anesthesia and OBGYN, for example, but I couldn't find anything in spinal surgery. So this would essentially be like the first step to say that, yes, there's definitely a problem, but then to have included an intervention, for example, in this stage, which is to say that, oh, let's try to segregate the waste better, let's try to increase that amount of recyclables. Well, we haven't shown, nobody has shown that spine surgery is generating this amount of waste per case. So I'm sure we will show that, and we will show that hazardous waste accounts for 80-85%, because we're all not good with our recycling or ensuring that the right waste goes in the right bag, because most of the time the orange bag is the bag that's closest to us. But we prove that problem, and then we can carry on to say that let's now try to segregate, let's try to increase the amount of recyclables that we generate.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Can I just add on to that as well? So having been involved in the orthopedic side of things, where they looked at hips and knees, even between hips and knees, there's a significant difference in between the waste that is being produced, and that's related to a lot in terms of the packaging of the implants and things like that. So similarly, we wanted to look at it in spinal surgery as a first step, as Siddharth mentioned.
Okay, thank you. Yes, please.
A quick question to the forensic team, Schwanstein's Kiel University. Just on the eligibility criteria, you mentioned disc degeneration on MRI scan. That's reported quite variably. I was just wondering, was there anything specific you're looking for?
It's fairly pragmatic from that point of view. So anybody who's got low back pain has got degenerate changes in the discs is the inclusion criteria for it. Now, I know some people use SPECT-CT to gauge if that is the area where the pain is coming from. So yeah, if you want to use that. In days gone by, we used to use discography, but there may be some centers who still want to use discography. So we'll just analyze the data separately and stratify that.
Okay, thank you.
We got the last 1 minute. Any more question? If not, then the final question I'll ask if you don't have any final question.
No, thank you. I'm done.
The radical trial, Kathy Price.
Oh, Kathy's had to go and catch a train.
Oh, right, okay.
She's had to leave early. She let me know before.
That's okay.
So I think we're probably done.
That's fine. Thank you.
Thanks
you very much
everyone for coming.